This is module 27. In this module, we are going to discuss about corpus and word sense disambiguation. So this is very interesting study here, and most of the discussions which will be present here would be quite innovative, quite new from the traditional frame of lexical semantics. We need to understand two things very clearly. Whenever we say word sense disambiguation, one thing very clearly understood that words have multiple senses. That means words are ambiguous. Ambiguity refers to not two but many senses. So we need a mechanism to disambiguate the meanings or the senses of the words. Now there are two important questions. The first issue is that words are ambiguous. We need a mechanism or system to disambiguate. Now the question is, why do we need it? Why we think that disambiguation is necessary? We know that even if we do not know that words have multiple senses, but in our regular communication, we are more equipped to normally understand what the word means in a particular utterance when somebody speaks to us. So whenever he says that I am going to a particular place or to station or to airport or some other places, we have least ambiguities. But whenever I say that I am going there, you are really confused to know what that word actually stands for. To a station, to a particular place, to an airport, to house, to school, or to a particular to any other place. So here we find that word there is not very clearly indicated to which place the author or the speaker actually intends or wants to draw our attention to. So we need sufficient information either before that or after that, or we need to have certain prior knowledge to decipher what that there stands for. So what happens in our regular day-to-day life, we come across a large number of words which are basically of this type. That means they are mostly ambiguous in nature. And thank God, because of our intuitive linguistic skill, knowledge base, we are able to understand most often that what the word actually means to us, and we actually capture that knowledge. Now, this is a quite complex process, how it happens to understand. But point is that here we need to have a well-defined methodology to understand how this happens. Now, there is another important issue, important question. Why words are polysemous? Why words are ambiguous? If somebody asks this question, we don't have any ready answer. What we find that in a language, many words, content words, function words, and other types of words that are available in language are ambiguous. But we can give certain linguistic reasons why a word is ambiguous. Normally, ambiguity is triggered from the contexts of usage. Then the question comes, what is context? We are going to discuss about that, how it contributes in understanding making the word ambiguous, as well as understanding the specific meaning. What we understand is there are various linguistic, non-linguistic, cognitive, and other factors which are responsible to make a word ambiguous. So we have to take the given truth that word is ambiguous by nature unless and until it is specified otherwise. So word has two types of senses. One is explicit sense and at the nearest active role in influencing in constructions of meanings. So as a human being, in our day-to-day regular linguistic interactions or communications, we are able to understand or differ or define the meaning. What are the resources we generally use? The knowledge of our external world, knowledge of discourse, pragmatics, conceptual interface between the underlying the communication, register, social relations, the existing of the participants, sociocultural background of the language users, so various other issues which contribute towards obtaining the actual sense of the words. So while we are trying to understand that words has ambiguities, we need to understand how it is and what nature is here. We can refer to the dialogue or the statement made by Malinowski in 1923. The meaning of any single word is to a very high degree dependent on its context. So where it says that context carries tremendous importance to give the meaning of the word. A word without a linguistic context is a mere figment and stands for nothing but by itself. So, in reality, of a spoken living tongue, the utterance has no meaning except in the contexts of situation. So, what Malinowski categorically mentions here is that word has no meaning at all until and unless it is put to a particular context. So, word acquires new meanings. Words acquire new connotations, new senses, just because when they are put to a particular context. And then, based on the variations of contexts, it is very much possible that we can get new meanings. Since the context plays a very important role in sense variations, we need to refer to the context explicitly, elaborately, to decipher the actual intended sense of the word. That the feature that word has multiple meanings triggered and controlled and monitored by situations or contexts actually generates the concept of polysemy. So polysemy speaks that a word in a language has multiple possible senses. So based on the occurrences in different situations, it triggers multiple meanings. So whenever these new meanings or multiple meanings are generated, we, in a reverse way, need to refer to the context to understand the intended meaning of the word. I am giving an example here. For example, the word head in English has multiple senses. So in the dictionary, you can find out head is treated as a noun only. But if I give some examples from here, you can find out that it has many senses. Suppose head refers to the top of a body, top of glass, top of a department, number of persons, number of cattle, knowledge, intelligence, inborn ability, top of anything, the front part of a thing, president of a state, leader of a gang, father of a family, source of a river, blade of spear, mouth of pimple, side of a coin, and many other senses. So what I see here that this word, the word head, can have multiple senses, multiple meanings based on different contexts. Similarly, I can refer to the Bangla word kotha, which has several meanings. It stands for word, statement, description, narration, story, event, opinion, promise, excuse, conversation, suggestions, provocation, prescription, compulsion, context, explanation, order, request, and similar expressions. So the thing is that they are actually referring to multiple senses. All those things now put us in a situation where we find three important factors regarding ambiguity. Number one, a word has an explicit or an implicit core sense of its own, which is normally recorded and represented in a dictionary, which generally comes from its etymology or origin or from source. So this is called a prototypical kind of concept where word has at least one meaning derived from its etymology or source. Second important observation is that the sense of word changes due to the context of its use. So it is possible that a sense of a word is open for change when a new context comes. And third important point is that a new sense is a conceptual extension of the core sense of the word. It is normally noted that the range of senses which are denoted by a word are not entirely irrelevant or entirely drastically opposite or some completely isolated or separated. Rather, there is a hidden string of conceptual network that actually combines those senses. They are sometimes explicitly linked, sometimes implicitly linked, but they might have certain network of relationships among those senses. So a completely new sense, altogether arbitrary sense, are normally not found in cases of words. So all those things actually contribute to understand the polysemy or ambiguity of words. So since we have argued that a new sense is possible for a word to generate because of the contextual frame or contextual use of the word, reversely, it implies that if we have a good mechanism to refer to the particular context sufficiently, then perhaps we are able to understand the sense, what it denotes. So keeping these things, we note that we'll try to understand how context is relevant. For us, context carries maximum importance in word sense understanding and disambiguation, since it triggers new sense variations. It is equally responsible to provide us sufficient cues, sufficient clues through which we are able to capture the sense. So this is possible. Now we need to understand the context. What is the context? Linguistically, context refers to an immediate, rarely detached environment in which a linguistic item occurs. So linguistically, we say a context. Context means the immediately preceding member of a word and immediately succeeding members of a word that constitute a constant environment in which the word is occurring. So it can be, here the linguistic item can be a morpheme or phoneme or a word phrase or phrase, clause, sentence or similar other forms. So for the present discussions, we are actually concentrating on the words. We find that here in the context can be the immediately preceding, the succeeding environment. So we need a theoretical background to understand how concept can be defined. Miller and Leacock, in their book on lexical polysemy in 2000, they proposed two types of contexts. For them, one is the local context and second one is the topical context. For them, local context constitutes one or two words before and after the word, after the target word whose meaning we are going to decipher, understand, and topical context refers to the discourse or the topic of the text. So, in their argument, it is very clearly said that if we look immediately before and after of the word, we might get certain amount of information to understand the meaning of the word. Alternatively, if we think that that information is not sufficient, we can look at the discourse or the topic, wherefrom we get sufficient amount of information to understand what the word means in that particular context. So, according to them, words can be understood if we refer to these two types of contexts. One is a local context, another is topical context. But here we have noted that in many cases, that is not explained here with examples, but we have noted in many cases that reference to these two contexts is not always sufficient. We need to refer to four types of context. So, here we are proposing a new scheme that we need to have. We can define context as not two types, but four types. Number one is local context. Number two, sentential context. Number three, topical context. And number four, global contexts. So, these are not four separate blocks, rather they are basically four levels or four layers which have a very good conceptual hierarchical layering in understanding the word meanings. The diagram is given here to refer to the figure number 1, where you can find out that if there is a target word, then first thing we can refer to the local context. That means immediately preceding environment few words and immediately succeeding few words. So, what happens here at the linear level, at the sentence level, we are taking some help of the meaning of the words which are occurring immediately and immediately before and after, and try to formulate, try to identify or understand the meaning of the target word. In most cases, perhaps in majority of the cases, this methodology is quite useful to understand the meaning, actual intended meaning of the word based on the context. But if we find that this is not adequate, we can refer to the full sentence. So, full sentence means we can have the whole full complete sentence. Now, the number of words are not restricted here. So, we call this is a sentential context. So, here entire sentence is taken as a composite unit, and we argue that all the members who are occurring in the sentence has certain role of one type or the other in understanding the meaning of the target word. So, when the local context is not sufficiently equipped to provide necessary information to us in understanding the meaning of the target word, we should refer to the sentential context. In those cases where local context information was not sufficient for us, perhaps information extracted from the whole sentential context can contribute to understanding the meaning. Our third argument is that if we find that information of local context and sentential context is not sufficient, we can refer to the topical context. Topical context is basically refers to the discourse, refers to the topic, refers to the content, refers to the subject matter about the topic, about the thing which is being discussed. So, it may include perhaps the whole paragraph, perhaps the whole chapter. So this is the whole thing where we get certain elaborate information of the discourse, the pragmatics and others to decipher the meaning of the word. In majority of cases, there is a very elegant method we can get that. But even then, there are certain ambiguous constructions, some highly metaphoric constructions, figurative usages, where even reference to the discourse may not be sufficiently appropriate enough to understand the meaning of the word. In that case, our last argument is that we should refer to the GC or global context. That includes knowledge of the external world, the extra linguistic knowledge base, the knowledge of the culture, knowledge of history, knowledge of heritage, knowledge of word knowledge, pragmatics. All those things are taken into consideration to understand the meaning. So in our argument, we can find out that 4 types of context are actually we need to refer to understand the meaning of the words. And in most cases, this is the almost sufficient to understand the meaning of the words. Now here, in our next diagram, we have tried to show how we can have, how corpus can contribute in understanding those word meanings. Here we need to also understand how words triggers different meanings, as I have already said, and corpus are actually helping. If we look at the diagram, we can find out that let us assume that we have a word, a target word, which has one meaning is derived from its etymology or from the origin where from it is derived. So this is we call S1, sense 1. So this sense 1 of the target word is derived from its etymology. Then it generates multiple meanings, other meanings. So obviously those meanings are triggered from the contexts and how this actually happens. Now look, if you look at that huge language data of a language is available, and from there we can have a large corpus. And this corpus reflects the possible contexts where this target word is found to be used. Say I get 100 sentences where the word head is used. Then we find that out of those 100 sentences, the word actually generating say 5 or 6 new different senses which is different from its etymology, which has been marked as, tagged as S1. Now if we classify those sentences based on the new senses generated by the word, we can find out that because in certain number of sentences, because of the context, the word giving a new sense, maybe sense 2. And because of another context, another type of sentences, we get sense number 3. Or in a similarly, we can get sense number 4 or sense number 5 or sense number 6 or sense number 7. So what we did here, we noted that the corpus which we used to identify the total range of senses a word is able to denote, we also are able to classify those instances into different types, different categories, different classes, different groups, and identify the contexts because of which the word is triggering new senses. So the application of corpus in understanding of sense variations is maximized here. We find that corpus giving us a better opportunity, a good opportunity to identify the total number of sense variations of a word, classify those senses, identify the contexts of those senses, relate among those senses, identify if there is a conceptual linkage among the senses caused among the contexts, as well as to trigger if there is a possibility to generate a new sense because of the variation of contexts. As we have already argued that the novel contexts can generate new sense for a word, this entails that in the next time we can come across a new usage of a word, and there the word is denoting a new sense. So what happens that we can have also evidences from corpus that there is a possibility for understanding the new senses that is possible to generate by new use in a new environment. I am giving an example here to understand that how all those 4 different contexts that we have discussed a little ago can contribute in understanding the figurative usages of the words in sentences. Here is an example, say, public has well relished your Sunday soup in the tabloid. If this is a sentence taken from one of the English texts collected here, what we understand is here that we want to understand the verb, say, the relished. So if we find that, we need to explore information from all contexts to understand that. Since the target is used in a very discrete manner here with a highly figurative or metaphoric sense. So to know the actual sense of the target word, we must have to answer to the following questions: who makes the statement, to whom that statement is made, when it is said, where it is said, what does the word relish mean literally, and what does the phrase relish your Sunday soup refers to, and how does Sunday soup become relishing for the public. And thoughtfully, we need to link up the words relished and soup to show that it is used not in a literal sense but in a very figurative sense. So probably information collected from all sources can give us an interface to an understanding how this helps to understand the meaning of that. So there are various strategies in understanding the words. Now how? Let us, in this diagram, we are trying to say, we are showing the mechanism how the information corpus helps to understand the meanings. First thing, we need to ask how many senses are there a word actually expresses, and in which sense the word is used. Corpus is the best resource to allow us to get this information. So we can directly refer to the examples or citations in the corpus, classify them, group them, identify the context, and identify how this happened. So we propose here a new strategy which we call Ames model. So that means acquisitions of information from multiple sectors. This is known as Ames model, accessing information from multiple sources in understanding the word meaning. So if you look at the diagram given here, it is something like that. So what happens? Let me explain a little bit that there is a target word which has a sense, and this target word has perhaps multiple senses, and in a piece of text it is used in a particular sense. I need to understand in which sense the word is used. So as a reader or a system developer, I have 2 alternatives. I need to process the meaning of the word. So I can have some linguistic resources in one hand to understand the meaning or actual sense, or the language corpus in other hand. What we do? First, we need to know context-free information. So context-free information of the words can be retrieved from its etymology, from its etymological dictionary, from its lexicology, its history found in recorded in books or grammar or from dictionary or thesaurus. So we can have large amount of information of a particular word about its usage, about its etymology, about its form, its grammatical role, morphological role, semantic role, and all other things from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major sources: etymology, lexicology, grammar, dictionary, and thesaurus. So we call them collectively as context-free information. So in most cases, we can access this context-free information, utilize them, process them to understand the meaning of the word. In the second part, we call the context-bound information, or context-bound information generally comes from corpus. What happens? In this context-bound information, we refer to the words to the particular context which is used. Then, while analyzing the context, we use our extra-linguistic knowledge to analyze the text, our word knowledge to analyze the text. Also, we use our pragmatic knowledge base and the discursive information. So, all those things contribute collectively together to understand the context-based information or context-bound information relating to the word. When these two layers of information are combined together, we are in a position to understand in which sense the word is used. What happens? We can have both layer of information in a sequential order. First, we refer to the context-free information, and whenever we find that context-free information is not adequate enough in understanding the meaning of the word, we can refer to the context-bound information. But context-free information is mostly detached one, and context-bound information is mostly available within the environment where the word is used. So, in understanding the word meaning, there are two strategies that we can refer to: the context-free information and context-bound information. Context-bound information mostly comes from corpora, which is very valuable and very information. So, in this module, we have tried to understand how context and language corpora contribute in understanding the word meanings, and how you can utilize those corpora to identify 4 different types of contexts and use necessary information from those 4 different contexts in understanding the word meaning. Thank you.